Greetings. My name is Michael Erlewine. I'd like to tell you about what I consider one of the most essential, at least useful, astrology techniques that I've ever found. I first learned it from the work of astrologer Grant Lewi in a book he wrote way back then called Astrology for the Millions. I know, the title sounds like a mass market book, but as it turns out, Lewi's book was perhaps the first time the term for the millions was ever used. And in this way, it is kind of prophetic because the book is indeed worthy of millions of people reading it. Now, the book is all about time and the planet Saturn, which of course we know that Saturn rules time. And although astrologers use many techniques, almost all of them are in agreement that the movement of the planet Saturn, called the Great Timekeeper, is a planet that affects every one of us. In particular, as Saturn moves through the astrology chart in its 30-year cycle, it takes 30 years to go around once. It marks a path that all of us must follow, ready or not. I mean, perhaps this is where the phrase, never trust anyone over 30 came from, because after the first Saturn return, as I've written in many of my books and articles, time as we know it comes to a stop, and we literally, spiritually, are born beyond time. It's difficult to explain in a short video like this, but basically, the whole idea that the Christians have found of being born again doesn't belong just to them. Being born again really happens when you're over 30, but another time for that. What I'm pointing at here is that Saturn is the great timekeeper of astrology, and its 30-year cycle slowly marks out the creation and completion of the physical form, of our physical form. We call it the prime of life. In esoteric astrology, time is said to stop at the age of 30, as I mentioned. And when Saturn completes its first cycle, that's when it stops, when Saturn begins to repeat itself by going over the same part of the zodiac since we were born over again. From 30 years onward, it's said that we begin moving beyond the grasp of time and slowly into eternity. And it is said that the first 30 years we spend, when we're young, building our personal space capsule, like our physical body. At any rate, Saturn is a key planet to note in our birth chart if we want to learn something about time and timing in our lives. And the movement of Saturn over the first 30 years amounts to almost a roadmap of the events to come during that first Saturn orbit of 30 years and then afterward. In fact, I found this technique so accurate and so useful that I not only programmed it for myself so that I could see at a glance when Saturn hit any of the four major chart angles, like the ascendant and descendant, midheaven and nadir, but also when it came to contact the various other planets. But then I also wrote down an interpretation of the entire sequence and eventually built a report about it so that others could have this in an easy-to-read form. Since childhood, adolescence, and even early adult life are so crucial to each of us, in this report I put together, I made an attempt to describe these formative years from an astrological perspective. Based on the gradual movement of the planet Saturn, this is one of the most tested and tried of all astrological techniques. In fact, it's used by almost every professional astrologer that I've met as part of any personal consultation. At least they know about it. Provided that your time of birth is more or less accurate, you will find that this information is both accurate and informative, giving you a general life overview. And then I follow that up by doing a close-up on your current changes, what's happening right now. These interpretations, as I mentioned, were written by me, and the program was written and designed by my brother, who's also an astrologer, Stephen Erlewine, and it provides full coverage of Saturn for 90 years. It comes with complete separate charts, diagrams for each of the Saturn's 30-year cycles, and each one is interpreted. So if you can't read a chart, which I wouldn't expect you to, you'll get an interpretation of what it means. These charts show the movement of the planet Saturn through all of the important chart angles with dates and years, and we can all read those, and then provides a personal interpretation for each cycle as it occurs in your lifetime. Also, it includes a chronological list of every Saturn-related event, along with dates, an interpretation of the event, and even a graphic reminder of the nature of the event. Anyway, you can find this chart. It's called Life Landscape, the landscape of life, on astrologyland.com, or if you want to go directly to that and get your own life landscape report, it's at the URL that I'm going to post here. I hope you find it as useful as I do.